Today I'm going to make a no-bake cheesecake, and I'm going to start off with the base. I'm going to need 75 grams of butter, and I use salted for flavour, and I'm going to use 150 grams of digestive biscuits. I just bought the cheapest ones you can get because it's going to get crushed up and mixed with butter. There's no point in buying expensive ones. That will be about 10 biscuits, so you'll get quite a lot out of that packet. So I'm going to start off by weighing the butter into a saucepan. So put it on the scales and make sure you zeroed the weight of the saucepan. And it's easier if you do it this way because as you're going to melt it, it's going to be straight in there, ready to go. The butter's been out of the fridge for a while, so it's quite soft already. So we're going for 75 of the butter. Now once I've done this, I'm going to put it onto a low heat to start to melt. I don't want it to brown or sizzle. I want it just to go liquid, and then I'm going to knock it off. While the butter's melting, I'm going to start on the biscuits. So 10 normal digestive biscuits weighs just about 150 grams. So what I need to do before I start crushing them with a rolling pin, or you could do this with a food processor if you were doing it at home, I'm just going to break them up a little bit first. Makes it a lot easier to do it with a rolling pin for the next part. So you just get in there with the end of a rolling pin, or you could use the bottom of a glass or a bowl, and you roughly crush them. We don't want them crushed to a fine powder, but we do need to get most of those big lumps out. When you think you've crumbed it up enough, give the bowl a shake, and you'll find that the biggest pieces rise to the top, so you can just give them a little bit more of a crush. Well, like I said, we're not going for a fine powder. We want it to be a little bit chunky. So that should do. And my butter's almost melted. I'm going to put a cloth down to protect the table. So you can see there's still a few pieces that haven't quite melted. So at this point, I'm going to take it off the heat and switch off the hob. By the time you've swirled that around a little, you can see those last remaining pieces are disappearing. What we don't want is for it to bubble and boil and even burn, start to go brown. So once you get to that stage, you're going to need a wooden spoon. I'm going to get the bowl full of crushed biscuits and put them in. And then all you're going to do is to use the wooden spoon and gently stir it around, and right around the edge and right across the bottom, like a figure 8 and then a circle. And you'll notice the biscuits taking on a bit of a darker colour. That means they've all been coated in a little bit of butter. You need your proportion correct for this. It's double biscuit to butter, otherwise it's going to be either too dry and crumbly if you haven't got enough butter, or hard and greasy if you've got too much. Once you get to that stage, you need either a foil container or you need a loose bottomed or a solid cake tin. It's up to you which you prefer to use. So I'm going to go with a proper cake tin for this one. You can grease and line it if you want to. I find if it's really cold and well set, you're not going to need to worry about that. So the whole thing then gets tipped in. The easiest way to deal with it then is just to use a fork and then a spoon, smooth it out into place so that it's pretty much the same thickness in all parts. And then I'm going to use that fork, putting it quite flat, and press base down. Turn it rather than try and twist your hand round. So just rotate the tin and keep patting. The more you press and compact it down now, the less it's going to break when you slice it. So get it nice and squashed down. This tin is a little bit bigger than the foil one, so it will be a little bit thinner, but it still works. And take your time over this, really press it down well, and then you can go over it with a spoon and sort of smooth it over, especially around the edges, because if it's really loose and crumbly, you'll cut it and your slices will just disintegrate. And it's quite important at this point that you let it have a bit of setting time. So I'm going to put that in the fridge. So it could be overnight, it could be half an hour, whatever you've got. The longer the better, otherwise you break it up when you're trying to spread your filling. If you make your base in a foil container, because obviously the foil is a bit soft and bendy, you're going to need to sit it on a flat metal tray to carry it around and put it into the fridge, otherwise your base is going to break. The first stage of the filling, or the topping, is cream cheese. You can use Philadelphia. I've just got a Co-op own brand here, it's the same. Don't use a low fat one though, because it goes runny. And I've got 50 grams of caster sugar. The recipe says 180 grams of cream cheese. There's 200 in here, so I'm going to use the whole thing. When you first open it, you might find it's got a bit of liquid in there. So just shake that into the sink to get rid of it. You really don't want to make this any runnier. As you can see, there's quite a bit there, quite a puddle. So I'm going to pour that carefully into the sink. Then I'm going to use a fork on this one. I'm going to get the whole thing out into my basin. And I'm just going to squash that up a little bit before I carry on with it. If you're adding any flavours like lemon rind and juice, that would go into here now. If you were putting Nutella in, that could go in with this, or peanut butter, vanilla extract, sugar goes in, and still using a fork because it cuts through a little bit easier than a spoon. So a fork for the moment. I'm just going to give it a bit of a stir, not going to go crazy. This is the point at which if you were using a low fat cream cheese, it would go quite runny. You can see it's loosened up anyway, but it would go really liquid if you have the wrong one, and it just doesn't set. So I'm going to clean off the fork, then use the spoon to go right down to the bottom just to check I haven't missed any sugar. For the next stages, I'm going to be using a spatula to get it all out of the bowl. The cream now needs whipping. It's double cream. There's just over 150 mils in there. It doesn't matter if you want to go up to 200. If you've got a bigger tin, just make a little bit more mixture. I'm going to use an electric mixer, and that's going to take me a couple of minutes to whip that up on full speed to start with. That's taken a couple of minutes and it's started to thicken. It's very soft still, but what I'm now going to do is turn it down to low speed and carry on. As soon as I start to see it looking quite thick, I'm going to stop. If you whisk it too much, it'll separate and basically you're making butter. So as soon as you can see a bit of a pattern coming in there, if you do a mark, it stays. It's literally going to need about another 10 to 20 seconds. So as you can see now, that looks quite firm and it's really holding its shape. So if I picked it up like that, I could pipe it. But what I need to do next is to get all of my cream cheese and sugar mixture in. And like I say, if you had other flavours that were a similar texture like Nutella, that would work quite nicely going in there. So use your spatula to completely clean out that basin. And what gets left on the spatula, wipe it on the edge of the basin, and then you sort of drop it into the bowl from there. So you shouldn't waste any. At this point, you need to treat it quite gently because you don't want to overmix the cream. And the good thing about using a spatula is quite thin. So you're sort of cutting through the middle of it and then going around the edge. So turn the bowl, sort of fold it over and plop it into the centre and mix it. Now if you've put something in like Nutella, you'll be able to see if it's fully mixed. Obviously I've got two creamy coloured mixtures here, so you're just going to have to make sure you've gone everywhere in that bowl. Now if you wanted to mix in some chopped nuts or fruit or chocolate or a fruit sauce or something, this is the stage at which you do that. When I finish doing that, now I'm going to go and get my base out of the fridge. So that base is nice and firm now, it's not going to crumble while I'm spreading the topping. I'm going to use either a spoon or you can use your spatula, it doesn't really matter, to get that topping onto the base. And again, make sure you get everything out. There should be nothing left in your bowl that could be added. Get those last little specks out. I don't tend to use a spatula for this because it's a little bit big. Best thing to use would be the back of a tablespoon. And again, because it's curvy, you can get in there quite nicely. So this tin was quite big. It's not going to be very deep, but I am going to top it with fruit to obviously add a little bit of depth to it. So once you've spread it to cover the base, so then I'm going to go back over it and try to smooth it out as much as possible. If you're topping it, there's no point in being too fussy though. So at this point, I'm going to put it back in the fridge to set off a little bit before I add the fruit. I'm going to top my cheesecake with some strawberries. The nice little ones, they all look pretty much the same size. I've given them a wash, that's why they're sitting on a piece of paper towel. And all I'm going to do to them is just snip off as little as possible to remove the green stalk. And once I've done that, rather than leaving them whole because I find they stick up a little bit, I'm going to then halve them. You can use any fruit on there. I'm choosing strawberries because they are in season at the moment. British strawberries are in the shops and they're a good price. They also taste lovely and they look good. So do as many or as few as you like. If you're thinking, well, I'd have that cheesecake for 6 or 8 people, you could mark out each portion with your toppings, or you could just put lots of strawberries or other fruit or chocolate or sauce, whatever you choose to use. So once you've got them all prepared, making sure obviously you're putting all the rubbish out of the way, don't have mixing in, you can then get your cheesecake ready. I'm just going to put these in face down. If I had bigger ones, I could have sliced them. You could stand them up around the edge and put them in before the filling. So there's lots of things you can do with them. So I'm just going to have a little bit of space between them. Pointy side on the inside because obviously the circle is getting smaller. So they should fit better then. So that's my finished cheesecake. I'm now going to leave it in the fridge to fully set and serve it chilled.